You know how they say you can't judge a book by its cover? Well, when it comes to science fiction and fantasy, you totally can. There's this secret visual code, right? A language we all just get. Let me show you what I mean. You know exactly what kind of story you're getting into when you see a cover that looks like this.
Versus this one, which is promising a whole other vibe, something completely different.
Or how about this? You can almost feel the grit just by looking at it. See? Each one of these is making a promise. It's signaling the world, the tone, and the adventure you're about to have.
Well, the answer is this wild story full of, believe it or not, accidental marketing, world bores, and a tech revolution that just turned everything on its head. All right, let's get into it. Our story starts not with some grand artistic vision, but with something way more down to earth, a legal fight in the 1960s.
The year is 1965. An editor over at Ace Books, a guy named Donald Wollheim, spots this little loophole in the U.S. copyright for The Lord of the Rings. So what does he do? He publishes his own unauthorized paperback, and it goes nuts. It sells over 100,000 copies, immediately. This was the moment publishers realized, whoa, there is a giant, untapped audience for fantasy written for adults.
And this is where things get really interesting. You're looking at a visual showdown. To compete, Tolkien's official publisher, Ballantine Books, scrambled to get their own version out. Now, the Ace covers, they were pretty literal. But Ballantine, they went in this completely different direction. Super abstract, totally psychedelic. It was perfectly dialed into the whole 60s counterculture vibe. And that's the key. This was the light bulb moment for publishers. They realized they needed a way to package this stuff, to create a marketing bucket for this new genre.
And here's the best part. You want to know who hated the official Ballantine cover the most? Tolkien himself. He couldn't stand it. He was like, what are these pink bulbs? Are those emus? And that, right there, shows you the brand new tension in the industry. The cover's job wasn't just to be accurate anymore. It was to sell a vibe.
So, of course, Ballantine ran with this success. In 1969, they launched the Ballantine Adult Fantasy Series. And they did something brilliant. Every single book in the series had this little unicorn head logo on it. It was basically a seal of approval, a little stamp that said, hey, you like Tolkien? You're going to love this too. This was the very first branded fantasy series, the first visual bucket, if you will. Okay, so marketing created the categories, but that's only half the story. There's this huge plot twist. The early look of sci-fi wasn't shaped by artistic vision at all. It was shaped by what people didn't have, by scarcity.
And this chart really lays it all out. Check this out. Before World War I, Germany basically controlled 90% of the world's high-quality synthetic dyes. But then the war happens, the Allied blockade cuts off that supply, and boom, you get a global dye famine. All of a sudden, printers are scrambling. They're stuck with these weak, muddy inks and crappy yellowed paper.
Now, this created a huge technical headache. You see, in theory, you should be able to mix 3 colors, cyan, magenta, and yellow, to get a full rainbow, including black. But the reality, the pigments they had back then were just bad. They didn't work right. So instead of a nice, crisp black, you'd get this ugly, muddy brown. The only solution was for artists to stick to bright primary colors that popped on their own and didn't need to be mixed.
And the absolute master of this style was a guy named Frank R. Paul, often called the father of science fiction illustration. His covers for magazines like Amazing Stories are just legendary. You know, they're super bright, kind of garish, but it wasn't just a choice. It was a genius-level adaptation. He knew how to make those cheap inks and that cheap paper scream for attention on a crowded newsstand.
So we've had decades of scarcity. But what happens next? The pendulum swings, and it swings hard in the other direction. Welcome to the golden age of paint. We're talking the 1980s and 90s, an era of total technological abundance and insane creative freedom.
This was all thanks to the desktop revolution. It kicks off with the Apple Macintosh, gets supercharged with game-changing software like Photoshop, and suddenly, designers have this godlike level of control. And on top of that, brand new digital printing presses made putting rich, vibrant color on a book cover affordable for the first time ever.
And this just unleashed a wave of artists we can call the masters of maximalism. Guys like Michael Whelan and Daryl K. Sweet. They weren't just making covers, they were creating these lush, epic, gallery-quality paintings. The whole point was to make the cover a window into another world, something you could physically hold, stare at, and just get completely lost in all the little details.
But you know how this goes. Just when things get comfortable, a new disruption comes along. And this one,
It was about to change the rules of the game forever.
All right, just look at this. A perfect example of a 1990s painted cover. It's epic, right? So much detail, so much action and atmosphere. You could stare at this for ages and keep finding new things. Okay, now let's take that same beautiful, detailed cover and shrink it down to what it looked like on a 2007 Kindle. Yikes, it's just a blurry gray smudge. You can't make out a thing. And that, my friends, is the birth of what we call the thumbnail constraint. Suddenly, what looked incredible on a bookshelf was completely meaningless on a screen. Designers had to completely rethink their entire strategy. Designers had to pivot, and they had to do it fast. The new rules of the game were all about bold typography, high contrast, and simple, iconic images. Think about that shift. The cover couldn't be a detailed window into the story anymore. It had to become a powerful icon for the story, something that could punch through the noise and grab your eye when it was just a tiny little thumbnail. So that brings us to today. We live in this dual world, right? We've got physical bookstores with beautiful shelves, and we've got online stores with tiny little thumbnails. So how do publishers deal with that? Well, they've gotten really smart. They've developed a dual market approach. And there's no better example of this than the recent redesigns for a little book called Dune.
It's a brilliant two-pronged attack. On one hand, you've got the minimalist paperback. It's got that clean, literary feel with modern fonts. This is designed to pull in brand new readers, maybe someone who just saw the movie and wants to check out the book. But then, for the hardcore fans, they release a deluxe hardcover. We're talking gorgeous textural art, foiled lettering, stained page edges, maps, the whole shebang. One cover is all about accessibility. The other is a beautiful object, a collector's item.
And guess what? It is absolutely working. The SFF market is exploding right now. Just look at the UK numbers. Revenue jumped a staggering 41% in a single year. That's insane. These kinds of smart design strategies are doing both things at once. They're bringing tons of new people into the fold while giving the die-hard fans something special to celebrate. So when you think about it, we've gone on quite a journey, from a copyright battle to a chemical shortage caused by a world war to the challenge of a tiny digital thumbnail. The history of sci-fi and fantasy covers has always been a story of adaptation, and that's the big takeaway here. It always will be. This visual language isn't static. It's constantly changing to meet the needs of the moment, which leaves us with one big question. As our books keep moving between screens and shelves, what's next? What will the look of the future be?